Hello everybody, this is Jason Heires and this is My Essential Albums Volume 2, and today I'm going to be talking about Pete Townshend's Empty Glass, and this is a truly good album. This was released in 1980. It's technically Pete's second solo album. However, his first solo album was kind of a fairly obscure album called Who Came First that kind of had a very limited run. It was mostly for followers of Mihar Baba, and there's a lot of things that are very specific to Mihar Baba on that album that make it kind of different than your usual Pete Townshend / Who album. Now this album was produced by Chris Thomas, and Chris Thomas was a pretty epic producer from the late 70s into the early 80s, early to mid 80s. He produced bands like The Pretenders, In Excess, The Sex Pistols, and Roxy Music. So he was a pretty big-time producer in that era. And at this point in time, Pete was still active with his career with The Who. So he signed a solo contract record deal, but he still was with The Who, and they were still on a record deal as well. Now, Roger Daltrey, when he was talking about this era, he complains that Pete saved his better songs for his solo career at this point than for The Who. And so there's a little bit of a bone of contention there. Pete says that his songs were, these were songs that The Who couldn't really do effectively. And there's a little bit of truth on both sides. Now, for Pete Townshend, when he would record songs, he would do complete demos of the songs. So he would play all the parts and sing and play drums and bass and guitar and everything that he had on there. He would have a demo version. And he even produced his own album. So for Chris Thomas, when he got into this, he must have, felt a little bit challenged because Pete already had a pretty strong background in production himself. Now there are two songs on this album that made people kind of question Pete's sexual orientation, or at least, maybe Pete's bi, or maybe he's had some gay or something like that. And that's Rough Boys and I Moved. Now the one thing about Pete Townshend and that really kind of sticks out in this particular album is Pete Townshend writes songs from the perspective of characters quite often. And he often writes songs from the perspective of characters in the first person. So he recorded the first song, And I Moved, supposedly he had wrote it for Bette Midler, and she asked him to write a dirty song. So he wrote that song for her, and then she rejected, saying that she wanted a song that was dirty and not filthy. So Pete decided to just go ahead and record the song anyway, and he put it on the album. And for Rough Boys is a really great song. It's one of Pete Townshend's better solo songs, and it's an epic track on this album. And if you look at the album cover, it says right in the album that the song Rough Boys is dedicated to his daughters and the Sex Pistols. So it may be that his song is written from his daughter's perspective, possibly. Another fantastic song is A Little Is Enough, which is just a really good song. Supposedly it's based off of something that he was talking about, having an issue with his wife, and and he said, well, does she love you a little? And he said yes, and he goes, well, a little is enough. So, and the other thing is the other big hit on this album was Let My Love Open the Door, which is another classic case of being confused because Pete writes in the first person perspective. A lot of people think it's just a really kind of cute little love song, but it's actually supposed to be about the love of God and letting the love of God open the door to your heart. But you'll hear it in music and everything, and most people just think of it as a nice little love song. It's actually probably his most popular solo song in terms of radio play and things like that. There's a couple other songs. Empty Glass, which is the title track, is a really good, solid song. Another song that is kind of a punky song that has some real bitterness that you can kind of tell that he's still torn up about Keith Moon's death is Jules and Jim, where he says, they don't give a shit, Keith Moon is dead. Is that exactly what I thought I read? But the thing about it is Empty Glass is really good from top to bottom. There really isn't any bad songs. It's one of Rolling Stone's top 100 albums of the 80s, and it definitely deserves to be. And it's definitely Pete Townshend's best solo album for sure. And so I would give it a really strong recommendation. So I hope you enjoy this. If you have any comments or anything, let me know, and I will talk to you later. Bye.